I want to start this hour by talking about the continuing rumblings within the Labour Party when it comes to anti-Semitism. We've got protesters who are gathering this morning outside Labour Party HQ to protest against the party's handling of anti-Semitism. There are 2 polls out over the course of the last 24 hours which make for interesting reading for the Labour Party and for voters generally, I would suggest. One of them, which came yesterday, which is a small sample, but it nevertheless suggested that whilst this anti-Semitism scandal is rumbling on, this is a problem, by the way, that has been acknowledged by Momentum. It's been acknowledged by Jeremy Corbyn himself, and doesn't detract from the problems of anti-Semitism in and of themselves. But it does suggest that Labour, having gone through this problem, are up by 2 points, with the Conservatives down by 1 point. There is also another poll that you will find in the Observer today, which suggests that half of the electorate believes that there are at least pockets of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. A third of voters, 34%, also believe that Jeremy Corbyn is among those in the party who hold anti-Semitic views. This, of course, despite his repeated denials and pledge to be a, quote, militant opponent of the problem. We'll speak to a Labour MP in just a moment. First, though, let's speak to Gideon Falter, who is the chairman for the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. This is the group who will be protesting down at Labour HQ later on today. I put it to you, Mr. Falter, that the Labour leadership have got the message now and that this protest is actually completely unnecessary. Good morning.
Good morning. We've had a few instances where the Labour leadership has claimed to have got the message, and I remember very clearly the circumstances which led to the setting up of Shami Chakrabarty's report into anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, at the end of which he found that there was no particular problem with anti-Semitism and everything was more or less left to fester again. And the Jewish community demonstrated 2 weeks ago to say that enough is enough. Since then, matters have deteriorated even further. We filed a disciplinary complaint against Jeremy Corbyn, which has been met with an initial rejection that is nothing more really than a hurried whitewash designed to protect Mr. Corbyn without even the formality of an investigation. We cannot stand for it. And that's why this afternoon, Jews and non-Jews alike are going to converge from all over Britain. We're going to be outside Labour Party headquarters from 2 p.m, demanding that the Labour Party fulfills its duty to hold Jeremy Corbyn to account. And, of course, we're going to appeal Miss Formby's predetermined decision not to investigate the disciplinary complaint that we've made against him as well.
Do you think that this is starting to, as a poll might suggest, slightly alienate the public in that, yes, of course, that if there is a problem with anti-Semitism, it must be addressed. Of course it should. It shouldn't exist at all. But if there are voters suggesting that they would continue to support the Labour Party despite what the Labour Party themselves are admitting are pockets of anti-Semitism within it, then really it's not having an impact on voters as such.
Well, we're an apolitical organisation. We don't have views on the various policies that the Conservatives, Labour, etc. have on any other matter. The one thing that we're focused on is protecting the Jewish community from anti-Semitism. And, of course, it's very concerning when you hear people saying, we don't really particularly mind about anti-Semitism. There's plenty of history which tells us that takes us down a very dark path. And one of the things that's been so concerning is that in the past 2 weeks, we have heard parts of the Labour leadership, including Jeremy Corbyn himself, saying that he gets the message on anti-Semitism, but then simultaneously we've heard very different messages. So, for example, John Landsman was secretly recorded, and this was released by the Evening Standard, both at the same time that he was saying that we understand that anti-Semitism is not part of a right-wing conspiracy by Jewish people. We've then got him secretly recorded saying that campaign against anti-Semitism is in fact part of a right-wing conspiracy to undermine Jeremy Corbyn. So it appears that what he's telling people in private is very different to what he's saying publicly. And, of course, we've still got prominent figures in the Labour Party who are still going out there and defending people like Ken Livingstone, who said that Hitler was supporting Zionism. We've still got people going out there and supporting people like Jackie Walker, who said the Jews were the chief financiers of the slave trade. People like Chris Williamson, who was a front bench shadow Labour MP, who are going out of their way for people like Jackie Walker.
Gideon, let me pause you there, because Chris Williamson will be able to answer it for himself in just a few moments' time, because he is waiting to speak to us. So I'll put those points to him and get his response to them, if I may. On a wider point, let's move this away from politics and talk about it more generally within the United Kingdom. Are there pockets of anti-Semitism within the UK, and how often are you seeing it manifest itself?
Well, we've been seeing a very troubling trend in the UK over the last few years. 2014 was the worst year on record for anti-Semitic crime, and we all hoped that following that there would be a major crackdown on it. But instead what we're seeing is the Crown Prosecution Service still failing to prosecute these cases. We've seen every year since 2014 become a new record-breaking year. So 2015 broke the 2014 record, 2016 the same. And the police statistics coming through for 2017 are looking pretty bad as well. So as far as pockets of anti-Semitism go, we've actually got something very interesting going on. One is that the British public itself is shunning anti-Semitism in large numbers, and Britain is the only country in Europe which I'm aware of in which the public themselves are actually shunning anti-Semitism, and that hatred is on the decline. But on the other hand, we've got anti-Semitic crime increasing dramatically, and of course we've got this huge problem within the Labour Party. And so what it would appear is that we've got increasingly active pockets of anti-Semitism which are having more and more effect. And whilst we don't have proper enforcement, both criminal enforcement, but also political parties like the Labour Party properly taking enforcement action against the anti-Semites in their midst, it keeps growing. And that's one of the reasons that we'll be demonstrating at 2 p.m, because what we want to see is the Labour Party having transparent disciplinary processes. At the moment, it's all held in secret. We want efficient disciplinary processes. I mean, the fact that Jackie Walker still hasn't even had her disciplinary process.
Look, Gideon, I get that there are clearly transparency issues there, and we can come on to those in a moment. But I'm wary of mentioning people's names who don't have a chance to respond. So if it's possible, I'll leave it there. And thank you for your time. And we'll of course continue to monitor this protest as it takes place this afternoon. Gideon Falter, Chairman of Campaign for Anti-Semitism. 11 minutes past 7. Let's speak to Chris Williamson, who is the Labour MP for Derby North. Mr. Williamson, do you believe this poll that suggests that 51% of Labour voters believe the party has a problem with anti-Semitism? Good morning.
Well, I don't believe we do have a problem with anti-Semitism. There have been a small minority of individuals who have indulged in anti-Semitic comments, and they've been dealt with. I think we've had 300 complaints. We take a zero tolerance, actually, of any form of bigotry or racism. 150 people have either been expelled or resigned, and there are a number of cases which are still to be determined, and obviously that needs to be addressed speedily, those people that are awaiting determination. And we also know that there's been some false allegations, which I think is pretty repugnant, to say the least.
It's difficult, though, because I would suspect because Jeremy Corbyn has said that Labour has been, quote, too slow in dealing with anti-Semitism. John Landsman and Momentum say there is a problem and it needs dealing with. Why then do you call this a smear campaign?
Well, what I've said is that some people have jumped on this and sought to use it for political purposes. I mean, that was pretty clear at the demonstration last week when you've got the likes of Norman Tebbit.
But that's not to say that there isn't a problem. I mean, the politics to this can be put to one side.
But the point I was going to make is you've got Norman Tebbit, the DUP, a most bigoted political party in Parliament, participating in a demonstration. Clearly, they're using that as an opportunity.
But your own MPs your own Labour MPs were taking part in that as well.
I know there were some Labour MPs there. But look, the issue is, for me, that, and nobody's denying that there have been some examples of anti-Semitic comments made by some Labour Party members. But the vast bulk of these repugnant remarks, which appear often online, are nothing to do with the Labour Party. Now,
well, of course,
anti-Semitism exists in the left, but and I accept that, and I also accept that a small number of people in the Labour Party have held.
Well, one of those being Jackie Walker. Hang on a sec, Chris. One of those being Jackie Walker, which was mentioned by Mr. Falter just a moment ago. She was kicked out of the party for anti-Semitism.
No, she hasn't been kicked out.
Well, do you agree that she was expelled? Do you agree that it was right for her to be expelled?
Well, first of all, she's not been expelled. She's not been kicked out. her case has still to be determined, and that's one of the points where...
Well, isn't that part of the problem, that she said what she's accused of saying and that no action seems to have been taken?
Well, I think her case does need to be determined more speedily. We've now got a new General Secretary, and I'm hoping that, we'll get a grip of the disciplinary procedures where there have been some cases outstanding for far too long. But as far as Jackie's case is concerned, let's remember that Jackie herself has Jewish heritage. She's married to somebody who is Jewish. She made a point about, or a comment about, two sides of her family, because she's got black heritage, African heritage as well. And she was sort of making the point about the two sides of her family. I mean, she's kind of making a trying to make a factual historical point. Now, that's been seized upon, and, she's been traduced, I think, in my opinion, very unfairly. Jackie Walker is not anti-Semitic, in my opinion, in any way, shape, or form.
Let me ask you then about.
People are attacking people who, have expressed a comment, people who are Jewish themselves, and accusing them of anti-Semitism.
Let me ask you then about another Labour Party member, Christine Shawcroft, who is head of the party's dispute panel, who defended an activist who posted a Holocaust denial article on social media. Was she right to resign?
Well, she took that decision to resign, and I think in Christine's defence, she wasn't aware that the individual had shared the Holocaust denial article. The individual himself makes very clear that he doesn't share that view. He is a relatively new member.
But he did share an article about Holocaust denial, which she seemed to defend.
Well, hold on. But
that can't be appropriate.
Well, if you could let me explain, just give me rather than interrupting, just let me explain the circumstances. Christine wasn't aware that the individual concerned had shared that article, and in terms of relating to Holocaust denial. The individual himself says that he doesn't hold those views. He was sharing it in a Facebook group because he's a relatively new member of the Labour Party. He was about his political kind of awareness raising, as it were, and he was asking for people's thoughts about these
Holocaust denial. Look,
being circulated.
I suspect, Mr. Williamson, some of my listeners might think that sharing an article about Holocaust denial is not a part of opening up a debate about Holocaust denial. It's totally inappropriate. Let me just ask you finally, because we're running out of time. Hang on a sec, Mr. Williamson. Let me just ask you this, because we're running out of time.
Let me answer the question.
Well, do you think then that there is a way back for Christine Shawcroft?
When you say way back, I mean, Christine has stepped down from the National Executive Committee. She, as I've said, didn't realise that the individual concerned shared an article about Holocaust denial. She says that had she known that, then she wouldn't have defended him. But listen, the Labour Party is the only party that...
So there is a way back for her. You think that she could come back into the Labour Party in some role once this is further explained? But she's resigned from her role.
She's not out of the Labour... Well, she's not out of the Labour Party. She stepped down from the National Executive Committee. It's not about her coming back. But the Labour Party is the only party that's taking action on anti-Semitism. Why isn't the media, why isn't the campaign against anti-Semitism, for that matter, raising issues about other political parties? The Conservatives have an official relationship with openly anti-Semitic political parties in the European Parliament. Nobody's saying anything about it. The only party that's actually taken a stand through the ages against racism and anti-Semitism, going back to as far as the 1930s, is the Labour Party.
Well, it must be very sad for you then to see that 51% of your voters think that you have a problem with anti-Semitism.
Well, that's hardly surprising given the hysteria that we've seen in the media, who have actually attacked...
But this is your own leader, and John Landsman saying this is a problem. This isn't the media. Your own leader, Jeremy Corbyn, says there is a problem with anti-Semitism.
I have already acknowledged that there are pockets, as Jeremy has, of anti-Semitism inside the Labour Party, which is hardly surprising, given that we are a mass movement of around 600,000 members. And when you actually look at the levels of anti-Semitic views in the public at large, which have increased over the same period, the anti-Semitic views of Labour Party supporters has diminished. Now, we take a zero tolerance of any form of racism in the Labour Party.
We must leave it there. I appreciate your time, Mr. Williamson. You've made your points and you've had good time to do so. I appreciate you coming on at this hour. Many thanks. Chris Williamson, Labour MP for Derby North. Look, I'd be interested to hear your views on what you make of what Chris Williamson had to say that this is overblown, this is taken out of all proportion. I find that hard to believe.